Welcome back to The Explainer, brought to you by Forge College. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today because we're about to unravel one of the true foundational mysteries of Web3 engineering, and that is associative storage. If you've ever tried to build a smart contract and thought to yourself, man, I really wish I had an infinitely large filing cabinet that magically weighed absolutely nothing, well, you're in luck. Today, we're diving into mapping fundamentals and Solidity. So get comfortable because this explainer is going to completely change how you architect your smart contracts.
Okay, let's dive into our engineering blueprint for today. First, we'll look at the sparse filing cabinet concept, then go over syntax and storage rules. After that, we'll tackle the default value dilemma, break down basic operations and nesting, and figure out how to solve the iteration problem. Finally, we'll wrap up with a summary and some next steps. All right. Let's jump right into part 1, the sparse filing cabinet.
Now, before we even think about looking at code, we really need to get the right mental model locked in. If you remember our previous lesson on the edge cases and best practices for data structures, we explicitly warned about alias mutations in memory. I want you to keep that in mind, because a mapping is a reference type that associates keys with values entirely in contract storage. Mappings never, ever live in memory. Actually, if you try to instantiate a mapping in memory, the compiler's basically just going to laugh at you. They are designed to function exactly like an infinite sparse filing cabinet. And the beauty of it is, only the drawers you actually open and put something into will consume network space and cost you gas. Think about how wild this is physically. Imagine a filing cabinet stretching out into infinity, containing literally billions of drawers. But here's the massive catch. There are 0 visible labels on the outside. There's no master directory taped to the side telling you which drawers actually have stuff in them. If you know the exact label, the specific key, you can walk right up to that specific drawer, open it instantly, and grab your data. But if you don't know the key, well, you can't just casually browse through the cabinet to see what's inside. It's incredibly efficient, but it's also highly secretive. Moving right along to section 2, syntax and storage rules. So now that we've got our infinite, unlabeled cabinet in our heads, let's look at how we actually build it. The fundamental declaration syntax is super straightforward. It's simply the word mapping followed by a parentheses. Inside those, you have a key type, an arrow, and then a value type. Now, the value type on the right side of that arrow is basically a wildcard. It can be just about anything, an integer, a string, a struct, or, even another mapping. But the key type on the left side, the compiler gatekeeps that heavily. You can only use specific deterministic types for your keys. We're talking addresses, unsigned or signed integers, booleans, and fixed-sized byte arrays from bytes 1 up to bytes 32. Now, do you notice what's conspicuously missing from that list? Dynamic arrays and structs are strictly banned from being keys, and there's actually a brilliant mathematical reason for this. Underneath the hood, the EVM has to take your key and run it through a cryptographic hash function to figure out exactly which storage slot that specific drawer is located in. To do that predictably, it absolutely needs fixed-size, predictable data types. Now, what's really interesting about these structural rules is how perfectly they dictate your smart contract design choices. Because it's a mapping, it is strictly confined to permanent storage. Because keys must be value types, we simply cannot use dynamic data as a lookup index. We're handed 0 equivalent default values, which forces us to track our own existence flags. And crucially, because there's no native iteration, we have to build completely separate indexes to list our data. Every single one of these structural rules forces a very specific design choice. Which brings us right to section 3, the default value dilemma. Let's tackle a quirk of our sparse cabinet that absolutely terrorizes junior developers. Imagine you check a mapping for an address's token balance, and it comes back with a big fat 0. So, what does this all mean? How do you know if that person transferred their tokens away and their balance is genuinely 0, or if they just don't exist in your system at all? Well, natively, you don't. In Solidity, reading an unwritten key doesn't throw a nice helpful error. It just spits out the default 0. And that creates a massive ambiguity for developers. But don't sweat it. There is a standard engineering solution for this. We simply create a parallel mapping ledger. We define something like a public mapping from an address to a Boolean, maybe call it hasAccount. So whenever we write data into our main balances cabinet, we simultaneously jump over to this Boolean mapping and flip the value for that specific address to true. Now, when we query an account later, we check hasAccount first. If it's true, we know the 0 in the main cabinet is totally intentional. If it's false, we know they just haven't been initiated yet. Sure, it's a bit of extra bookkeeping, but it solves the dilemma beautifully. All right, let's shift gears to section 4,
basic operations and nesting. Let's look at the day-to-day commands you're going to use to manipulate these cabinets. Operating a mapping really just boils down to 3 steps. Step 1 is the write. You just assign a value directly to the key. Simple as that. Step 2 is the read. You simply query the key. And because of how the EVM hashes the key to find the storage slot, this is an O of 1 lookup. That means it takes the exact same amount of gas to look up a user, whether your contract has 10 users or 10 million users. It is literally incredibly fast. Finally, step 3 is delete. But keep in mind, the delete keyword in Solidity doesn't actually destroy the drawer. It simply resets the drawer's contents back to its default state, like 0, which handily frees up some storage space and can actually score you a nice gas refund. And this builds into something even more complex: nested mappings. You can easily have an address mapping to, well, another mapping. This is the classic ERC20 token allowance pattern. Think of it kind of like a Russian nesting doll of filing cabinets. You open the first drawer using the token owner's address. But inside that drawer isn't a number. No, it's a whole new infinite filing cabinet. Then you use the spender's address to open a drawer in that secondary cabinet, which finally contains the allowed integer amount. The exact same default rules apply here too. If you open an unwritten nested drawer, it just silently hands you a 0 without spending a drop of gas to create new storage.
Now for Section 5, solving the iteration problem.
We've talked a ton about how great mappings are, but now we have to address the final major limitation that trips up almost every single new Web3 developer. Mappings give you lightning-fast O1 lookups and highly efficient sparse storage, yes, but they have absolutely no enumeration. You cannot write a for loop to iterate through a mapping. You cannot ask a mapping for its length. It is mathematically impossible because the data is scattered randomly across storage slots based on those hashes we talked about. Arrays, on the other hand, give you contiguous storage, and yes, you can enumerate and loop through them, but searching them is much slower and way more expensive. So what on earth do you do if your front end needs a list of all the users who have non-zero balances in your mapping? Well, you have to manually maintain a completely separate registry array. Every single time you write a brand new user into your mapping, you must also push their address into an array of users. And if you delete them from the mapping, you have to carefully remove them from that array too. Keeping your fast lookup mapping and your iterable array perfectly in sync is honestly one of the core architectural challenges of writing robust smart contracts. And finally, Section 6, summary and next steps. We've covered a ton of ground today, pulling apart the blueprints of Solidity's most powerful storage structure. So the crucial point is really these 4 takeaways. 1. Mappings are storage-only containers. They associate a specific key with a specific value directly in the contract state. 2. Unwritten keys return default values, forcing us to track existence ourselves. 3. There's absolutely no native iteration or length checking. You've got to build your own index arrays for that. And 4. Despite these quirks, they offer incredible gas efficiency for O of 1 single key access, making them the absolute backbone of almost every major protocol in Web3 today. But hey, before we officially sign off, I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative thought. We talked earlier about using a parallel Boolean mapping to solve that whole default value dilemma. But what if, instead of just an integer, we put a custom struct inside the mapping drawer? And what if we embedded an initialization flag directly inside that struct? Could we magically solve the existence problem and store rich data all in one single gas-efficient lookup? Well, spoiler alert, the answer is a resounding yes. And that is exactly what we're going to be tackling in our next explainer, using mappings with structs. We are going to combine the lightning-fast lookup of the sparse cabinet with the incredibly rich, organized data packaging of structs. It's going to let us create the ultimate explicit, gas-efficient storage patterns that elite auditors love to see. And that completely wraps up today's explainer. I really hope this session has illuminated the incredibly fascinating mechanics behind mappings and Solidity for you. Remember, building an intuitive understanding of how these storage slots actually work under the hood is exactly what separates a good developer from a truly great one. Now, to master more Web3 engineering concepts, dive right into the next module, and put these skills to the test, be sure to head over and visit forge.college. Thanks so much for joining me on the explainer brought to you by Forge College. I'll catch you in the next one. Happy coding.